Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Green Room. We're in the back end of DisrupTV, episode number 281. We've got two amazing guests. We're still trying to figure out what happened at Davos, but we'll figure that out later. So, welcome. Oh, wait. So what we're going to do is we're going to do reverse introductions. We're going to start with Ryan, go to Mike, and go to Steve. And we'll ask you where you're calling in from and what you're talking about today. So, Ryan, where are you calling in from? What are we talking about?
Hey everyone, yeah, Ryan Williams here. I'm the founding partner of Ashbury Legal, calling in from sunny Oakland, California, and we're going to talk about DAOs today.
DAOs. All right. Mike, what are we talking about today? Where are you calling in from?
Sure. Mike Nugent from Vestigo Ventures, and we're going to be talking about early stage fintech.
Very, very cool. Early stage. Who knows early stage more than our next guest, Steve? Who are you calling in from? What are we talking about?
I'm calling in from Davis, California, not too far from San Francisco. I am the CEO of Founderspace, and we are going to be talking about demand hunting and how to create great startups.
Very cool. Well, we're going to turn it. We'll start the show, kick it off to Elle, back to you.
All right. 3, 2, 1.
Hello and welcome to Disrupt TV, episode number 281. I'm here with my awesome co-host, Holger Mueller. Vala Afshar is actually on vacation today, and he'll be back for the next episode. But we're really excited to have you here. And of course, as you know, this is the Enterprise Tech Leadership Show, talking about what's happening next. I'm here joined by my awesome co-host, Holger Mueller. As you know, he's the Vice President and Principal Analyst at Constellation Research. He's had extensive careers in the enterprise software space, and he's one of the top 5 analysts in the world, according to the International Institute of Analyst Relations. And of course, I'm Ray Wang with Constellation Research, and of course, your co-host for today. But as you know, it's not about us, it's about our amazing guests. And today we have an amazing guest to kick it off today, none other than the one and only Steve Hoffman, venture investment and chairman and CEO of Founderspace. If you know Captain Hoff, he's built Founderspace, a global innovation hub for entrepreneurs, corporations, and investors with over 50 partners in 22 countries. Steve is also a venture investor and the founder of 3 venture-backed and 2 bootstrap startups, and of course, the author of several award-winning books, which we're going to talk about one today. These include Make Elephants Fly, Surviving a Startup, and The 5 Forces. And if you've never read those, definitely check that out. And you can follow him on at Founderspace. So Steve, welcome to the show. And of course, Holger will kick off with the first question, but welcome, Steve.
Great to be here, Ray. Really nice to be here, Holger.
Well, welcome, Steve. But I have to ask the first question off the script right away. Why Captain Hoff? I mean, I'm maritimely inclined. You have some Pacific Ocean behind me. Why Captain?
Captain Hoff is actually my gamer handle. So I'm a big-time gamer. It came out of that. And then it became my nickname, running Founderspace, which is a global startup incubator and accelerator. I'm the captain of the team, and everybody adopted that name.
Excellent. No, I like it. Right. There's so many captains: Captain America, Captain Jack, whatever, Captain Hoff. And I thought you came from the media world, but obviously you come from the gaming space as well, right? And one of the things in your bio which stuck out to me, you have more jobs than a cat's life, right? So it is true. And
yes.
The quiz here is, right, which cats have more lives, the European ones or the American, the English-speaking ones, right? So the Europeans ones only have 7. So
well, the Americans have more. We have 9 lives.
Exactly, 9, yeah. So you're 2 European cats. You're still working on being 2 American cats.
Exactly.
But getting us to laugh at the beginning. You have one really challenging thesis in the book, right? Which is the idea doesn't matter, right? Which is kind of like offsetting to some of the entrepreneurs, but I'm sure you have some great thoughts behind it. Please explain that.
So most entrepreneurs think in order to start a startup, they have to have an epiphany. They have to have that big idea, something that Elon Musk would be proud of. I'm going to go to Mars. I'm going to change the world. But honestly, when you really look at how successful startups launch, most of them don't have a big idea. In fact, they do. A lot of them have a big idea, but it's the wrong idea. So let me give you just a couple examples of this. We all know that there was this company, and they started out creating a video dating site. They thought, video dating, that's the big idea. Everybody's going to want to date by video.
Hot.
It's going to be hot. Who wouldn't want to do this? This is in the early days of the internet. And so they launched this, and lo and behold, people didn't like to date on video. They don't want to meet people on video on their first meeting. It's just very uncomfortable. And so they were floundering about. And then they wanted to share a video file, which is a large file. And in those days, there was no way to easily share it with their friends. So they said, oh, well, what if we upload it to our video dating site? We've already built the infrastructure, and just share the link. And what company did this become? Well, this became YouTube. So YouTube wasn't built by, I'm going to build the largest video broadcast network in the history of the world on the internet. That wasn't their big idea. It was a video dating site. And then it was simply link sharing. And once they did that, it led them to actually creating what they are today. Look at another company we all know about, Google. When Google started, Larry Page and Sergey Brin thought they were doing a nonprofit. They thought their idea was so small that it would never make money, which is ironic because look at Google today, one of the most profitable companies in the history of humankind. But what they were doing was basically allowing researchers to find research papers online using their algorithm. That was a niche market. It's a small market. So they were right. They were a nonprofit. Then they discovered they could take what they had actually built and apply it to a bigger problem. And this is something, the list goes on, like Yelp. We all love Yelp. We all love writing the reviews and reading the reviews. That was an afterthought to Yelp. Slack, the company we all love, Slack was actually a game. It was a game. And they had built this tool their engineers were using to communicate amongst each other. And when the game failed, that became Slack. So I'm telling entrepreneurs, this is what you do when you want to start your company. Don't sit around trying to think of the biggest idea ever, because what you need to do is dive in, and you need to pick an area that you feel passionate about and that your team feels passionate about. Get a great team. We feel passionate. We're going to start exploring. We're going to come up with 20 ideas. And if you come up with like 20 ideas or 30 ideas with your team, then you become much more objective. You don't stick with an idea just because it was the only idea you had. You're like, we'll try this. And if this doesn't work, we'll try that. And one idea leads to another. A much better way to launching a successful startup.
Okay. So you're saying basically, don't get stuck too much in the idea. Me as a German here, don't get too disciplined about it, but be ready to use an overused word for startups. Be ready to pivot when there's a big opportunity. Is that the essence?
I want people pivoting from day one. So when you are launching a startup, what you're doing is you're not trying to think of that sexy idea that sounds so great we've seen so many of these ideas fail. Like people come up with these they sound great on paper, they're great in a PowerPoint slide, they end up nothing. What I want you to do is first of all, spend 80% of your time looking for the people you want to work with. Like, who's the amazing engineer? Who are the amazing designer, UI designer?
Yes.
Who are these people? Then you don't have to have the ideas as CEO. Like, this is another problem. Like, people think, oh, I'm the CEO. I have to come up with all the ideas. Huge mistake. Like, think about it. Elon Musk, he didn't come up with the idea for Tesla. That was a company he invested in. Kalanick, he didn't come up with the idea for Uber. It was an idea he invested in. You don't need to be the generator of the ideas. You need to be the one that brings the people together and starts them down a path. And together you discover what works.
So the logical
Steve,
question
that is amazing advice.
Yeah.
Steve, that is amazing advice. And really, I mean, as you think about it, when we look at the life cycle of organizations, it's the dynamic founder, it's getting an amazing team together, then figuring out if there's a product and viability, and then of course, reaching out to different markets. And then of course, after that, you go public and all hell goes all goes to crap from there. But you had a very interesting point, and along that journey, it was really demand hunting. Like, what is demand hunting? Like, do you go out and deliberately create the conditions for demand hunting? Or is this something that just happens to happen? Or is this something over the years you said, look, successful startups all have this skill set?
So I like to say after getting your team together, which is the first most important thing, and picking a direction, like I want to innovate on the restaurant business, I want to innovate on the fishing industry, I want to make it more sustainable, whatever it is, at that point, you need to, it doesn't matter what your ideas, how much you love your ideas. So let's pick the fishing industry. Let's say I want to go into the fishing industry. I want to make it more sustainable because there's a lot of bycatch, there's a lot of pollution, there are horrible working conditions. All these different things are wrong with this industry. It's like antiquated, it's killing our oceans. I want to go into it and change it. Well, you can have the best idea in the world. I will tell you, the best idea. And you can literally build the best product in the world. Like it could be like just a phenomenal product, a new way to fish, and with all this technology and locating fish and only getting the right fish. And you can go to the fishing industry and say, look, this will get you no bycatch. It'll be, you know, it won't pollute. It will make you all these different things. And they could turn around to you and say, how much does it cost? Oh, we're not interested. Like we don't want to spend the money. We don't want to change.
That's
like,
never happened before.
Yeah, right. Like we're the fishing. We don't care that we're killing off all these species of fish. We just want to make money. Like, you know, there are a lot of industries out there like that. So you can have the best idea in the world, the best team, the best everything, all the money in the world, and they don't buy your product. And what you need to do is you need to find the inner. This is the bottom line. You can never create demand. Demand exists in the world independent of you. Great ideas do not create demand. Demand tells you that the idea is great. Because if nobody wants it, like I said, if the fishing industry isn't ready to change and nothing, and they're not going to spend the money or spend the time or like even look at you, you're never going to change it. What you need to find is the intersection of a demand in the fishing industry, something that they need, they want. And then you can couple it with your ideals. Like, okay, look, I'm going to create something that will save you a lot of money. I'm going to create something that will make your fishing vessels much more efficient. I'm going to create, automate things so you need less people. And at the same time, we're going to cut down on bycatch. We're going to cut down on pollution. We're going to do all these great things. But they're probably going to buy it for the first reasons, right? Because they've already proven ethics aren't their number one concern, but they might be your concern. So finding the intersection of demand and innovation is really critical if you want to do positive change in the world.
Very interesting, right? And hopefully the marketeers didn't get a heart attack who are always working on demand generation and finding a way to get the demand up. And
this is a really good point. So marketing, I view marketing, it's not demand generation. Marketing is actually communicating and targeting the right people who already want the product, and communicating it to them in the way that they will respond. Like I've been in an industry like the interactive TV industry. Everybody's like, it's going to be great. It's going to be great. One of my first startups was in that area. There was no demand. People didn't care. Like they didn't want to interact with their television. There were set-top boxes out there. All of them failed. Our product didn't go anywhere because there was no demand. It was a great product. It was a very visionary idea. The TV industry, people didn't want to interact while they're watching shows. It's lean back versus lean forward. Now, let me tell you, what I like to have entrepreneurs do is go into the world and look for what I call pent up pockets of demand. It's like you're an oil wildcatter and you are sinking a well. And if there's no oil down there, no pressure coming up, like for the oil, you're not going to get anything. You're not going to create that. You can only find it. That is demand hunting. So you're going to have to sink a lot of wells at the beginning, a lot of different ideas in different areas, go out to the real market and see what produces a gusher, which explodes your startup.
So you heard here from Captain Hoff, right? Do learn more about seismology, learn more about geology if you want to be a successful startup person, and pivot a lot, right? But once you find the demand, right? A great analogy there. But then you want to have the growth, right? Hyper growth has been the buzzword, right? So what can you give? What advice can you give Captain Hoff for the growth perspective, the exponential growth side?
So if you want to have a startup that grows exponentially, first of all, you need demand, right? You don't have demand, you're not going to grow. Like, just won't happen. Demand is the power that pushes you to grow. You need a great team to execute on it, which we've gone over. Number 3 is your business model. Now, if you look at all the great startups out there, almost all of them, not all, but almost all of them have one simple model, and that is recurring revenue. That means every time you grab a customer, you hold on to that customer and they keep giving you money. In return, you give them value. Because their 2 biggest expenses most startups run into is their people. People are very expensive. And number two, the biggest expense they run into is customer acquisition. It costs a lot. Like if every time you have to go, if a customer comes, they buy your product and they leave, then you have to go out and find another customer. Really tough business to make a profit. Really, really hard. So if you want to grow exponentially, every time you get a customer, you need to hold on to that and you need to continually monetize. So let's go through the companies that do this. Look, Amazon, right? You know, they're making a little money every time you buy a product. Uber, every time you get in one of their vehicles, they're making a little money. Google, they have this whole ad network, and every time, you know, you go to a website,
so
you know,
low CAC, high ARPU is what you're talking here.
Exactly. And so if you look at your model and you can make it where you get this customer and they're always engaging and you're always getting money from them on a continual basis and it adds up to a lot of money, good business.
Great advice.
Amazing. So this is part of the locking the customers into a product or service, but let's take that a step further, because you often talk about, you know, it's not about the product or service, it's bigger, right? And it's almost like when you say ecosystems, to me, it sounds like you're saying, you know, it's kind of important to go activate some movements, right? Go out and activate movements, take the ecosystem and then supercharge that. So what do you mean by that?
So I tell entrepreneurs, I work with hundreds of entrepreneurs, and I tell them, don't build a product, build an ecosystem. And they're like, what? Don't build a product? I'm supposed to build a product. No. And ecosystems are so much more powerful because first of all, when you get that customer, when you continually monetize that customer, the first thing you want to do is lock that customer into your product and ecosystem. Now, how do you do that? So number one, you do that by getting that customer to invest in you. And investing doesn't necessarily mean money. It can mean time and resources. So you look at these companies that keep going and going and going, like Oracle, like people might want to switch to another database. There are a lot of better ones out there, but they've invested so much time and resources in integrating with Oracle, they can't escape. Like they're locked in, right? And then Oracle, Salesforce, Amazon, any of these companies, they have built not just products, but entire ecosystems. So they have third-party developers, this whole, like when you come into their ecosystem, you end up not just using their product, but you end up using all these other products and services provided by third parties that create a richer and richer experience for the consumer. So let me give you a very simple example. Salesforce, right? There are a lot of better CRM softwares out there. There's leaner ones, better user interfaces, more intuitive, lower priced. The list goes on. But Salesforce did something. They were early, and this is an early adopter advantage. They got their customers in there. And then instead of just giving them a CRM, they allowed all these third-party developers to come in and build an ecosystem. So when you come into Salesforce, you're not just using Salesforce. You start adopting all these third-party products. And along comes another competitor, CRM, that you want to jump into. And you're like, oh, I could go to them. They'll cost me less money. They'll be, you know, better UI and all this. But they don't have all these other things that I'm getting. So I can't really leave. Like I'm locked into this ecosystem. That's the power. That's why building ecosystems is so important. In consumer apps, it's the same way. Like we all go to Amazon, right? Why do we go to Amazon? Because everybody in the Amazon ecosystem is contributing to the value of that ecosystem. Every time I review a product, I make Amazon stronger. Like, because those reviews are really valuable to me and everybody else in the ecosystem. Every time a new vendor joins, they make Amazon more stronger. Every time a new customer joins, they make Amazon's ecosystem more stronger. You get this network effect that is extremely powerful. And that's what I'm talking about. So think about that when you're launching your company.
This is amazing, Steve, and I think we're learning a lot from you here. I'm gonna ask you one real quick question. What idea has gotten you so excited in the last, say, 30 days? That's something that you hadn't seen before, or a team that's actually working on an interesting idea that got you really excited. Someone that's part of the Founder Space family.
So there's so many different things I am super excited about.
I know. I'm trying to get you down to one.
Yeah. So one of my companies is about to go public called Trust Stamp. Really love them. They're a great company. Super excited. New product that I just stumbled across that, you know, I slouch. I sit at a computer all the day. I'm sure most of your audience, you know, any techie out there sitting at their computer, I slouch. I came across this product and I was working with them this morning, giving them feedback on it. It's called Zen, and it is a Zen posture app that uses your phone on your camera phone, to actually monitor your posture. So every time you start to slouch, you see this little icon start to slouch, and you can even hear an audio cue, and you sit up straight again. So that's what I'm super excited about today.
Thank you. Steve Hoffman, venture investor, chairman, and CEO of Founderspace. And of course, you can follow him on Twitter at Founderspace. Thank you so much for being here on the show. And of course, come on back. So,
thank you.
All right.
Amazing stuff.
Pretty crazy. Amazing stuff that's going on here. So, but hey, we got our next guest, Mike Nugent, the managing director of Vestigo Ventures. So, and it's, Mike joined Vestigo in 2016 with 20 years of public market and private equity and startup experience. Prior to joining Vestigo, he was the CEO and chairman of Bison, a SaaS-based data and analytics solution provider for the $10 trillion private investment market space. And of course, it was rebranded as Cobalt and acquired by FactSet in October 2021. He's currently a board member of Acorn Finance, Kuru Credit, For Motive, Jabo, Long Game, Vault, and is a board observer of Cushion. Mike previously served as board observer of Mirador and was acquired by Kuna Mutual Group in November 2018. So thank you so much for joining the show. Thanks for being part of Vestigo Ventures. And you can follow him on Twitter at ND Nugent. Welcome to the show.
Ray, Holger, thank you very much for having me today.
Great to have you, Mike. But we all carefully curate our backgrounds, right? I know Ray's picture in the background. I see your picture. But is it a golden microphone right next to you? Or what is the object behind your left?
It's actually an old school nautical telescope that's actually mounted. So I've got a couple random, all the stuff that my wife doesn't want in the house winds up in my office. So I've got all my odd knickknacks.
Rounds up in your backgrounds at DisrupTV. So we continue the nautical theme. I love it, from Captain Hoff to a maritime telescope. Perfect. So you obviously work a lot. You only work in the fintech space right now, from what you
correct.
Know, right? So, and what we learned from Steve is principles which are generic for all industries, right? Is there something which makes fintech investments different than the rest of all the business opportunities for startups out there?
Very much so. Having founded a fintech company, it was always very shocking to see how, and I don't want to say easy it is. Any startup is difficult. You're defying gravity. But the consumer plays where folks could sort of put a test button or just see if people are going to be interested in something. And if they click it enough, let's go build it. Let's actually add that in. With fintech, you don't have that luxury. You really have to build institutional, commercial ready solutions the day you deliver it. And you can't really have those test buttons. And so what it really creates is a much greater dependency or value on the customer development effort. And that's one of the things I feel almost got away from everybody during this, venture capital, heydays over the last 5-6 years. Everyone had a good idea. Lots of people are willing to write checks. And a lot of people got away from the discipline of how do you really quickly build a company that people are willing to support. And by support means buy, give you $1. I can admit I made the same mistake when I founded Bison, 11 years ago. I had this, what I thought was my epiphany, and I thought I was going to change the private markets. And so I went out to every one of my meetings and did, dozens of meetings in advance of founding the company. But I was telling them how I was going to fix their world. And the problem with that is it immediately put them down a path of just thinking about this idea that I was telling them versus me asking the questions to finding out, were the problems that I experienced, just my own unique problems, or were they industry-wide? And so when we first launched Bison, it was a marketplace, and it was amazing. In the first 90 days, we had $5 billion of interest between both sides, buy side and sell side, and of course, slayed it. We figured it out. Look at this, we're the next massive unicorn. And it took one VC to just eviscerate me and tell me all the things that were wrong. And it was a matter of listening to the negative, not just the positive. And I took a step back and really did deep research on how do you efficiently really utilize customer development, and how do you go out and vet a thesis without poisoning the well? How do you actually make sure that people are telling you what you're building is what they want? And most importantly, how do you get the pricing to say, is it worth it to even build this? So for me, I'm a complete customer development and science of sales wonk. I'm an absolute, evangelist of data, although I've got the technical chops of like my 12-year-old. He's probably better than me. But I absolutely am a mad data-driven investor. So, I think in fintech, there really has to be a true discipline, a true belief in what makes lean startup bought in, and not just a pretty, UI, on top of antiquated technology, which has happened all too often.
You know, Mike, real quick, I mean, we should get back to the thesis of Vestigo Ventures when David, Ian, and Mark founded the firm. Like, I mean, it's super data driven, actually. It's actually very freaky how data driven it is. Let's talk about that. I mean, what that thesis is, and then we'll come back and talk about, what's going on in the fintech space. Are we late or are we early?
Absolutely. So Vestigo is a pure seed stage fintech VC focused on North American companies. For us, what we saw was that there was a gap in funding at the seed stage. And to your question, Ray, we really have to address all the headlines, all the money that's gone to the industry. Did we miss the boat, or are we still in the early innings? And I'll answer that in a moment. But part of this is, Mark Cassidy was, 12 years CEO and chairman of LPL Financial, which is the largest independent broker-dealer platform in the world. 17,000 RIAs or so on it. And over the course of Mark's tenure, they invested about $250 million into the infrastructure there. And what that did was create just a highly effective, efficient company where you could take a wealth manager from any one of the major wirehouses who earns about 20%, plug them in on the LPL platform, and they'll make 80% take home. And that firm, LPL, is more profitable than the other wirehouses because of the efficiencies there. Dave is the pure technologist. So Dave graduated from MIT, was deep into building neural networks, founded a company called DataSage. DataSage did all the original big data work for Walmart. And when Jeff Bezos poached the Amazon big data team to found, the Walmart big data team to found Amazon, brought Dave and his team as well. So working on all those original preference algorithms. If you bought this, you might like that. People who looked at this, looked at that, was all from that work. And then had just an unbelievable exit to a company you guys probably remember, Vignette. And Vignette, was a roll up of the dot-com days, the darling of the time. But when the market collapsed, it took everything down with it, particularly in the dot-com field. And what Dave wanted to do was really turn the paradigm on its head of company formation. Is instead of every time you build a company, you need to build a new database and then figure out what was good and bad data and what were good and bad decisions, and sort of flying with one eye open for the first few years of a company's formation. Wanted to flip that on its head and create a core database to spin companies up from. And that's Kogo Labs, where we're co-located. So Kogo sits on about 16 petabytes of data, consumer intent data, which is, really gives us an opportunity to sort of view into about 86% of North America's, online activity. And that consumer intent plays really well to high fidelity on anything that's B2C. Gives us very good insights on anything that's sort of B2B2C or really work site, and helps us really identify those opportunities and threats that are on the horizon for enterprise companies that otherwise wouldn't be able to see that. So for us, having that data advantage just gives us much more confidence in what we're doing. And it makes us really believe in the objective data versus just the subjective gut feels we might be seeing on something.
So, Mike, are we late or are we early? We got banking as a service, we got DeFi, we got decentralization happening, everything's being funded, the fintech layer is being disrupted, crypto value, is taking a play. We got Ryan talking about DAOs in a little bit later here. Yep. I mean, it looks like it's a mess. It looks like we're early, but then again, some people tell me we're late. What's your timing on this, and what does the data say?
I'd say we're in the midst of the organized chaos of the second inning. Venture capital had historically gone to, bio, to consumer, to industrial. Fintech or financial services were just left behind, and everybody was building their own proprietary technologies internally, and it became so inefficient. One of the other portfolio companies we work with is Vestmark, and Vestmark just saw this beautiful vision that essentially the world's going to go to separately managed accounts, and it's not going to be just for the ultra wealthy. But you had to have a very smart communication platform to do so. So if a major wirehouse is working, running separately managed accounts with all the benefits of that, it costs them about 18 to 20 basis points to run those programs. If they move on to a Vestmark stack, it costs them 1 to 2 basis points. So when you can create that much of an efficiency on the cost of operation, you have to run to it.
Wow.
So, and that's across the board here. Every one of these firms with their, old COBOL, old Linux, everything that's still sitting there that they're bringing people back from, vacation or from retirement to help support these rickety old structures. They're going to need to, for the first move was really leaning into third-party apps that could plug in and augment what they were doing. But now they're going to be able to have a much greater dependency on much more efficient software, much more efficient, installs that are going to make their businesses, competitive where they've been falling behind.
Yeah, super interesting. I have an uncle who retired at 55, was a COBOL developer. Now he's in his 70s. He works 4 days a month and makes more money than in a month 20 years ago. So
He's in high demand. You talk to any of the incumbents, they're like, "Hey, can you find him, please?"
And I'm
Whatever
thinking,
it costs to get him
after
back out of,
Fortune, I
you
like
know.
COBOL. I need to dust that off.
And you can't teach this the new generation of engineers are not going to bury themselves in learning COBOL. So this is the breaking point. You know, are they going to actually move off this old rickety structure that's 30, 40 years, you know, in the rearview mirror, or are they going to move to new, you know, efficient engineering and developers and engage the next generation?
It's also a great example that very deep, rich IT budgets don't necessarily deliver a good IT landscape or reality, right? Which you see also in telco, not just in fintech, right? So good lesson learned from that perspective. And I also like that you say data-centric, not groupthink-centric, right? Because when I'm not a VC or a PE investor, but I see like somebody gets someone in one space, everybody else gets someone in the space, kind of like guaranteed funding, because there's kind of like the lemmings effect or so. So a question for you is now, where do you see the biggest opportunities, right? It's quoting Steve Hoffman, right? The high pressure areas which are under the ground of the earth, where the opportunity will just come out. Do you see anything interesting there?
I do. The two companies jump out, and you know, we made an investment one back last year, one year before that, but one is cognitive process automation, and one is behavioral analytics, really on, you know, reading digital body language. And you know, the first one, it's a company by the name of Roots Automation, and absolutely love the way that they're attacking it. You know, we've all seen these intelligence layers that get put on top of companies, you know, customer database or just, you know, what they're operating with. But so often they were so highly customized that they weren't even able to be sort of supported or have the scale to sort of build out. And they also weren't being built with specialization in regards to the training modules and learning data sets. So now if you look at ones that are, you know, starting in an industry but have broad enterprise applicability, that's exactly where we're seeing unbelievable demand. So, you know, Roots is one where it's a cognitive process automation, you know, and many people have a hard time differentiating that from RPA. But RPA historically has had such a poor success rate. You know, very few people have actually had very good outcomes with it. And this is one where they've taken it. It was, you know, a team of founders that were heading up innovation at AIG. And what they were seeing is, you know, all these large corporations were the only ones really employing this AI. And they were building an AI infrastructure, employing an army of people to do it. But then it became completely proprietary, not scalable. And then you had sort of the rest of the market that were not getting any AI solutions except some off-the-shelf stuff that wouldn't fit to their workflow. And this really needs to be a much more cost-effective solution, pre-built bots designed by industry. And so they started doing that, and they work with, you know, fantastic, you know, large banks, large consultancies, large insurance, you know, anything that's like a regulated industry where it's such need for high throughput, but there's so much human error that comes in the process. That's where this dials in. So accounts receivable, accounts payable, regulatory form submission, claims. You know, you just think about all these things that are not secret sauce to make a company the next winner, but all the stuff that they have to do, and you plug this in. A couple of, you know, really interesting differentiators. It's a company that plugs in via the VPN. So it's not even a worry about security. If a company has competence with its own security, you're plugged in via the VPN, you're banging, you're going, and the bot is basically getting an employee image. And now the great thing there is the bots learn from the bots and the bots learn from the employees. So what a brilliant way to have federated learning, tackling all these common, you know, responsibilities for every company. And it plays from one industry to the next to the next. And then the other one is a company by the name of Formotive, and they built a really intelligent, you know, behavioral analytics platform, helping to look at what is high potential sales, where there's friction, and most importantly, where there's fraud, both in the sales and the claims process with anybody. So they work with a major wireless carrier that's had hundreds of millions of dollars of online phone fraud, many the top 5 insurance carriers, and even one of the leading gig employers, where if there was, you know, readiness, worker readiness of every 1% increase adds about $1 million, $2.5 million of EBITDA to that company just for having worker readiness known.
Yeah, super interesting example on the fraud side, near and dear to my heart, being here in San Diego because of FICO. So lots of upside in many other different areas.
Yeah, we're definitely seeing that. I mean, but you know, as you're guiding these startups and really getting them as you do early stage investing, you guys pretty much do seed investing, if I remember correctly.
Correct.
what advice do you give these startups? I know you're purely focused on the fintech space. What are you looking for? What kind of advice do they ask for you? What kind of things that help a tech startup in the fintech space become more successful? What would you tell a person actually seeking funding from you? Like, what's the qualifications they need to have in front of you? So
sure, and I'd say that guidance shifts very quickly depending on the stage of the company. But to echo some of Steve's comments earlier, you just got to dive in. And one of my mentors back when was another VC by the name of Jeff Fagnan over at Accomplice, and he hammered this comment of build, prove, scale. And I just absolutely love that. You have to build something. You have to have something people to kick the tires on or see how it feels. And once you have that, then you've got to prove that it really is as valuable as you think it is, or as the market is giving you feedback on, and how you really price that, and how do you actually create a repeating process. And then once you have that, that's when you invest in scale. I think all too often folks get those out of order. They hire salespeople before they have a process. So what I would say is, you need to jump in, feet first, start doing it. And don't expect someone to sort of fund you to leave your job to go chase your dream. Start, working 2 shifts, start doing whatever you have to do, get something going so people can kick the tires on it. And once you have it, listen to the negative feedback. Don't just listen to the affirmation, because everybody everyone likes an underdog, right? So if somebody starts to build something like, oh, that's wonderful, and you might walk out of the room, they're like, no way, that's terrible. But they don't want to say that to your face. So the people that are brave enough to tell you what's wrong or what the shortcomings are, that's the most valuable feedback they're going to get.
There's an easy solution.
Well, if you're on the West Coast, then it's passive aggressive. Yeah. If you're on the West Coast and we're passive aggressive, you'll never get a hold of that. So, but yeah, Holger, sorry.
No, I get a German investment company, because the Germans would usually tell you. So
they'll tell you exactly. Yeah.
I have to put the filters on here. No, I'm just kidding. But,
we were talking about that when I was running Vice, and I had a number of VCs tell me that I was transparent to a fault. And at first I was like, oh, well, what am I doing? Am I disclosing? I'm like, no, I went over that as a badge of honor. I will tell you exactly what I see. We want to close the loop. It doesn't do anybody any favors to just have pleasantries and niceties. It's a matter of getting down and adding value. It might not always be the answer that people want to hear, but they're going to get a clear answer.
Yeah. But I want to burn 1 minute on, you're not only the ruthless investor, VC, whatever, you're also chairman of a nonprofit, which, as a father of 2 teenagers, is very close to my heart. So do you want to spend like 1 minute and tell us what you're doing?
Yeah, let's definitely jump in.
Absolutely. So very fortunate recently to be asked to join as the chairman of the Vivian Helene Foundation. And it's a foundation designed to help support families going through the grief of the loss of a child. So very dear family friends unfortunately lost their daughter at the beginning of 2020, right before the pandemic. And it's something that's just, grief, and you can't put words to it, for the loss of a family losing a child, whatever the circumstances may be. And this is a foundation that's designed to really help everybody. Obviously, we all know that an ounce of prevention is worth more than a pound of cure, but most of the services out there really sort of stop when there's the loss of someone. And this is where they're really trying to bring back and help people come out of that dark place, know that there's others that are like them, and what can they do to sort of find light, find something to look forward to, despite they've had the greatest loss ever. So I was humbled. I'm absolutely flattered that TJ and Beth Maxwell asked me to join as chairman of the foundation, and we're actually holding our first our inaugural fundraiser next weekend, and then our inaugural retreat for the first 10 families in October. And the long-term goal is to be able to have a healing center for anyone that's experienced the loss of a child. So Holger, I really appreciate you asking about that. And it's one thing that's really come up during this pandemic is this silent killer of children. It's this depression, this anxiety, everything that's going on, and the stigma around not being able to talk about having problems. We're all going through tough times. We're seeing global concerns. We're seeing immediate concerns. Just talk. Everyone just needs to be able to open up and talk and find and ask for help if they do need it.
Yeah. Perfect. Well, thanks for doing this.
Wonderful point. Yeah,
awesome. Thank you guys very much for having me, and I really appreciate you asking about the foundation.
Yep, we're here with Mike Nugent, Managing Director at Vestigo Ventures. You can follow him at MD Nugent. And of course, you can check out the foundation and follow that at, vivianhelene.org, if I remember. So if that's correct. So, yep. All right. Hey, thanks a lot. Thanks for being on the show. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday. Enjoy the long holiday weekend, gentlemen.
You too. Wow, Holger. We're back to back on the tech startup scene, but we couldn't do anything without talking about my favorite topic, which is the metaverse economy. And who best to talk about this and talking about what's happening next in this space is our next guest. And our next guest is Ryan David Williams, founder of Ashbury. He began his legal career on Wall Street, the global law firm Morrison and Forrester, I would say MoFo, where he helped companies with their IPOs. He then joined the Silicon Valley powerhouse, Oric, and of course, went on to help early stage companies. But, you've been focused and forming Ashbury Legal over the last 2 years, creating a human-centric designed approach, and of course, changing the way we look at law and actually on the forefront of some amazing things. We were sitting on a plane together. I can't even remember where we were headed. I want to say it's New York when actually, maybe it was Austin, and we were talking about something.
We're going to South by. That's right.
We were going to South by, and you're like, I do this thing with, DAOs. I don't know if you know anything about it. And we just went at it, and it was amazing. And so welcome to the show, Ryan. And of course, welcome, more importantly, to DisrupTV. So.
Yeah, very happy to be here. It was a really serendipitous flight, and really nice that the world is in a place where we were able to do that. And now here we are talking today, and I think we'll see each other in Austin again in a couple of weeks. So really excited to be here, and nice to meet you as well, Holger.
Yeah, nice to meet you. And as I'm picking apart the backgrounds, is there any way to catch something maritime, or are we breaking that spell right now in your background?
I was going to mention it. I'm glad you asked. I'm a horrible weatherman here, so I won't be able to point out to it right. But here we go over here. Behind that plant there is actually an old sextant. So I do a lot of sailing here in the San Francisco Bay.
Perfect.
So I don't know how much more nautical you can get than that. So
it's excellent.
We're 3 for 3 on the maritime theme for you.
You sextants are the hammer in maritime, right? To know where you are. So perfect. So thanks for keeping the theme up. And now I know why I'm co-moderating today.
Yeah. Just don't ask me to use
celestial navigation is hot.
It's very decorative, but not very functional. At least not in my hands.
Sure. So. The interesting question is, right, everybody's speaking about it. What is a DAO, a DAO, right? Explain it to us in layman terms for everybody who never heard the term.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's, pronounced DAO is all you hear discussed. It stands an acronym standing for Decentralized Autonomous Organization. You hear about this a lot in blockchain and crypto space and in Web3, and we can talk a little bit about what that means in a moment. But, I'm not going to jump into here's what it means in the crypto context, because I think it's much more applicable than that, generally applicable than that. And I also think it is a little bit more basic than that, right? Like you don't have to understand distributed ledger technology to understand a DAO. So in its most basic form, which I think is probably the right place to start, a DAO is really just a new way for a group of people to organize collaborative economic activity. That's it. It's an organizational structure. Just like a group of people might say, hey, I want to, work on this business together. Let's go form a partnership. Let's go form a corporation, or, more recently an LLC. A DAO is just another way to kind of collaboratively organize economic activity. Now, there's still no, feel free to jump in at any time, gentlemen, but there's still no kind of legal definition of a DAO, or even really like a market standard for what a DAO is. So we have clients come to us all the time and say, hey, I want to form a DAO. The first question is, well, what does that mean to you, right? There is no kind of DAO in a box, and we're really still figuring this out. If Mike said we're in the second inning of fintech, like we're still in batting practice for crypto and DAOs, right? There are still kind of 3 general themes, though, and principles that I think kind of cut across all different DAO structures we've seen. 1 is there's a horizontal structure, 2, inclusive participation, and 3, transparent decision making. So kind of what I mean by those in the horizontal structure, there's no CEO of a DAO, for example, right? So within kind of that organization and how it works, there are just DAO members. 1 token equals 1 vote, right? In terms of inclusive participation, most of the time, anyone can join these DAOs. So if you have an interest in a particular topic or a community or a project, and there's a DAO that's been structured to organize that economic activity, you can go join that DAO. You can vote on proposals, and the more tokens you require, the more you can, the greater say you're going to have in that organization. 3rd is the transparent decision making. This is very kind of comes out of the ethos of distributed ledger technology, where everything is kind of open source and publicly available. If you go look at a block explorer, you can go see every Ethereum or every Bitcoin transaction that has ever occurred. This kind of comes out of that, where these votes are on chain. And so what you'll see is a proposal be made by a member of the community. And typically anyone can put forward a proposal. You then can go vote for that proposal using a tool kind of called Snapshot. There are others that are coming up as well, but that's probably the most popular one. And we can see what the proposal is. We can see all the votes cast. We can see the yays, the nays, and more than just the actual decision making, but oftentimes the actual end result of that decision making is also transparent and on chain, right? So if you have a DeFi protocol and you have a community who's making a decision about some of the parameters, right? What's the collateralization rate that we're going to require on this DeFi lending protocol? Well, you can see that proposal, you can vote online, you can see every single vote out there. And then that change might actually be automated. That vote comes in, it says, let's change the collateral requirement to 80%. Well, that will automatically be done at that smart contract. And so not only, again, is the decision-making transparent, but the actual, affecting that decision is also often done transparently. So horizontal structure, inclusive participation, and transparent decision-making, to me, in my mind, and there's a lot of people who have different views on this, because again, we're in batting practice, that is a DAO to me in its most basic form.
Yeah, that's actually a pure form. And I see a lot of modifications popping up, right? Some of these are related to like how you even get voting rights. Can it be done without a token? How do you earn a token? What's that value exchange? It's almost like rules at at your favorite organization or membership organization without like the secret closed room, deals that are going on in the back end. So
it's exactly right. You're able to make those rules, right? And then you're able to change those rules. So it's not just how is it established, but how does it evolve? And the rules for how I vote and who votes and how many votes I get are changing, right? And it might not just be, hey, I went out and bought a bunch of tokens, because that would mean, hey, whoever has the most money in the room has the biggest vote. You could also have certain DAOs where you earn those by participating, right? So you have to be engaged and actually care and follow what's going on to be able to earn a vote. And so now it's not who's the biggest stockholder or who has the most tokens or who has the most money. It's who cares the most about this, who has dedicated themselves to this the most, and as a kind of a result of that, who is in the best position to know and to care about what should happen next. And I would posit that's not always the biggest stockholder.
And so question for you then, so people choose to join these in their own free will. How do the rules get enforced? Let's say, someone's upset at a rule or something. Like, do they arbitrate somewhere? Do they go get sued somewhere? Who enforces that? Or it's like, oh, tough luck, you joined. These are the rules. Go away. If you want to change it, go start a movement and come back later.
It's a great question, and we're still kind of seeing how the both governments and courts are going to answer that question. But I think there is kind of a for the crypto and blockchain maximalist and purist, they would say these are the rules. You knew the rules when you joined, including the rules for how to make changes. Go about this change that you want to see in our protocol and our DAO and our community based on these rules, right? But you have dispute over this, right? This is where you get forks in blockchains, right? People have probably heard of forks. It's half the community says let's reverse a transaction, half says no, let's not reverse a transaction. So they say fine, we're just going to go our separate ways, right? And I think you're going to start seeing that with DAOs as well. Hey, I don't like the way the majority, kind of tyranny by the majority. I don't like the way you're doing this. We're going to go form our own DAO. And we can talk in a little bit about, how DAOs are regulated and what courts are saying about this. But, we already have kind of our first lawsuit by a DAO member against a DAO. And the question is, there's all sorts of questions. We could spend a whole, hour going through some of those. But the short answer is we're still figuring this out. And it's very much still largely driven by the community itself.
Amazing.
Is there any regulation? I would be happy for not seeing it in a while. Not that I'm against regulation in general or per se, but there's always the unintended consequences of that, right? So the last thing you want is a Sarbanes-Oxley version 2 for DAOs, an early phase for that, right? But is there any regulation on the horizon, or is it still just an early phase where if you form a DAO, you don't even have to worry about it yet?
Well, it's a great question, and I would say you absolutely still have to worry about laws and regulations, right? I mean, one thing we know for sure There's no government regulator or plaintiff's lawyer on the planet is ever going to say, oh man, I don't like what you're doing, but oh shucks, you organized yourselves as a DAO. There's nothing we can do about it, right? So we know that's not going to be the case. We already see some lawsuits and some regulatory activity in the space suggesting that that's the case, or that's not the case. But in terms of specific regulation on DAOs, there really isn't anything yet. There is in Wyoming a new statute that created what's called, a Wyoming DAO LLC. And so they're trying, it's not so much regulating DAOs, but saying, hey, we're actually going to give you a corporate form designed specifically for this type of organizational structure. In Wyoming, this is kind of, very appropriate, I think, that Wyoming's doing this, because many people don't realize that, LLCs have become so ubiquitous that you can form an LLC in basically any state you want right now. That wasn't the case up until the 70s, when this concept of, hey, people don't like the corporate form for how they want to organize themselves. It doesn't give enough flexibility, et cetera. And so Wyoming said, hey, you know what, we'll create a new corporate form called a limited liability company, and it's going to give people a new way to organize their economic activity. This is really just an extension of that. This is just, again, a new way to organize collaborative economic activity. And Wyoming has acknowledged this and is at the forefront of saying, hey, we're going to create a structure for it.
One of the leaders.
Absolutely. And like I said, it's good to look back at history and say, well, they did this before, right? So when people are rolling their eyes saying, well, we don't need a new corporate form, right? Or a new way to organize economic activity. We have all these all these existing structures. Well, think about, we didn't have LLCs, 40 years ago, 50 years ago. So I think DAOs are kind of pushing that conversation. Will they be codified in every state like an LLC? I don't know. But I also don't know that it's critical, that the answer to that is a very critical topic, because what I do know is that they're pushing the conversation forward about, hey, are existing corporate forms best suited to do all economic activity, maybe some subset of economic activity, but there's a large segment of the population who says, I want something different. The way I want to organize around like-minded people to do like-minded economic activity, I don't like the existing options out there for me.
Wow, that is huge. I mean, that is a big shift that we're seeing in the marketplace. We're definitely going to see that for quite some time in terms of where DAOs are headed. But is this a fad? Like, are we going to be like, just kind of like this year was the year of NFTs, like next year will be the year of DAOs, and people are like, hey, forget DAOs, like, or is it going to be so part and integrated of our corporate decision making, of how memberships are created, how companies are being funded, right? How movements are being activated. I mean, I see these as huge investment vehicles, but maybe I've got it wrong.
Yeah, you know what? I think the buzzword DAO is, a little bit of a fad, at least if we talk about kind of, how popular or, it is right now, or how much you hear it. Like, I can't go to any conference without hearing someone asking about DAOs and film, DAOs and art, DAOs and NFTs, DAOs and the metaverse, right? And that was kind of what the NFT conversation was like last year, and it was what the tokenization conversation was like the year before. So like, whether DAOs themselves, like, I've been a corporate attorney for 10 years. I don't think, Visa and MasterCard and, are turning themselves into DAOs anytime soon. But I do think that these kind of underlying principles and of wanting more transparent decision-making, wanting a more egalitarian share of economic activity, especially when I, the user, am the source of a lot of that value, I think these things are here to stay. And I think, if we look at the, human evolution of kind of business and kind of economic structures, it's always been an evolution, right? And to think that, we finally have perfected the way that economic activity needs to be organized and managed, and it's not going to ever get any better than this, is probably the height of human arrogance. And so I, look at a company like Facebook as a good example, because, they're easy to kind of pick on, and they also have a profound impact on the world. Like, if Facebook adopted principles of kind of transparent and community-driven decision-making, like, I don't think its users would, raise their hand and agree to be, manipulated by foreign governments, and Cambridge Analytica probably doesn't happen, right? Or you hear all this talk about privacy, and everyone's really upset about, how Facebook handles privacy. I kind of feel like people don't care about privacy, and what they really care about is, I become the product, and all my private, semi-private information is now being used to make Zuckerberg rich, right? Or the stockholders, the major stockholders rich. And I think if Facebook shared some of that economic gains, right? And everyone for your tweet, the more likes you got paid a little bit. I bet
we get value exchange right away.
Yeah, I feel like oh my gosh, my privacy would start to die down a little bit, right? And so this is just examples. I think that the companies of the world, whether they're going to become DAOs or not, cannot ignore these kind of principles and these demands for better distribution of the economic rewards of that activity and more transparent, inclusive, egalitarian decision-making processes. That is not a fad.
Very interesting, right? It's companies compete about business value and value creation and how they do that, but it's also legal forms which play a huge role, right? As we know, like in the maturing part of capitalism 100 years ago or so. And do you see the existing companies, you mentioned some of that, do you see the existing companies thinking about having maybe a DAO, a daughter subsidiary, which they don't overrule totally to provide kind of like that innovation and all the benefits of the DAO to themselves?
Yeah, I absolutely do. And we talk to big companies all the time who are thinking, how do I adopt some of these principles into what I do, right? And again, I'm not handing over the keys of the kingdom to this decentralized organization of a bunch of anonymous people all over the world. But I see a lot of it in terms of things like, I want to be charitable, I want to make contributions, but I want to make contributions that matter to my community. Right. And thinking about community as kind of a stakeholder, not, hey, I have owners, I have managers, I have workers, and I have customers, but starting to collapse those a little bit into kind of a singular persona kind of known as the community and saying, hey, I want to do what matters to the community. So if you community vote on where we're going to spend our corporate philanthropy. Right. And I think that's not a DAO. You don't need a legal structure for that. But I think it is still a profound recognition that, hey, let's listen. We talked a lot about, hey, let's listening to people out there. Let's listen to our existing customers, not just in terms of what product they want, but how they want us to operate, how they want us to be corporate citizens. There's a huge ESG movement obviously going on. And so I think that, yes, all companies of all sizes, of all kind of, different stages of their life cycle need to be thinking about community and their community. What does that mean? What do they want? And how do you give them some say? Bring them into your fold. We talked earlier about building an ecosystem. It's doesn't have to be just by locking them into some antiquated product system. It can be by making them feel like this is theirs. They have some role here. Create more of like a Rousseauian social contract. And those folks aren't going to want to leave your ecosystem because they're going to believe in you, because they believe in themselves and they help create what you are. And that is powerful.
Ryan, we are just at the beginning of the DAO movement. It is going to be incredible to see where these things and vehicles take us. I hear anything from the pure intent of the DAOs you're talking about to modified DAOs where, a lot of the board governance, a lot of the automation of rules are being created to activate communities inside organizations. I see this also as funding mechanisms that are popping up, as people are creating these organizations that can make super fast decisions and then adjust along the way. And it's going to be amazing to have this conversation a year from now. And more importantly as well, when we're on stage at the Enterprise Digital Asset Summit on June 8th as well, where you'll be up on a panel talking about DAOs. So right before consensus. So
looking forward to it, Ray.
Hey, well, thanks so much for being here. Ryan David Williams, founder of Ashbury. And of course, you can follow him on Twitter at Ashbury Legal and catch him live June 8th at Consensus in Austin, Texas. Thanks a lot for being on the show.
Thanks for having me, you guys. Everyone have a wonderful weekend.
Woohoo. All right. Oh my God, Holger, this is the tough part. We have gone through 3 guests like nothing. Time flies when we're on DisrupTV. And more importantly, it's been a crazy thing. What are your thoughts? I mean, going through these 3 guests, what do you think, what have we learned today?
I mean, super interesting, right? So, startups are the ones who keep the industry on its toes, right? The software industry, right? And with software powering this, and other startups in general, other areas too. We talked about software here. And it's so important to have this business innovation paradigm which forces new thinking, different ways of doing things, enabled by technology, right? Just speaking with Ryan, I was just realizing the DAO is the first legal form, not like a legal form which is codified yet, but it's the first one enabled by technology, right? So before it was just you have to put enough capital in, you're reliable for the capital to a certain point. It was more like a security of doing business, super important in the innovation of the LSC, the S Corp, and all the other corps. But interesting that the technology is there to do that, and blockchain has been looking for use cases, right? So that's interesting, and great advice from Steve, no question about that, and great to see the portfolio and how they manage it. I really like that data-driven and not groupthink approach on Vestigo Ventures. So that's my nuggets to take away from today for now.
Very, very cool. Wonderful analysis. Next week, episode 282, we welcome back Vala to the team. And of course, we'll be talking to Dr. David Bray, Director, Geotech Center, Geotech Commission. Also, Joshua Goldbard, founder and CEO at MobileCoin. And of course, Sarah Navanti at MobileCoin, as we continue to discover about this conversation about new sets of technologies. If it's Friday, it's DisrupTV, 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern, almost every Friday. And of course, join us for all our files repeats, broadcasts, of course, on YouTube, Spotify, and of course, your favorite streaming service. So thanks a lot, everybody. Have a wonderful week.